Thank you Skillshare for kindly sponsoring this video. Hello everyone, my name is Magdalena. I am an illustrator, also known as the Wild Pencil, and this video will be my own guide to colored pencils and how I like to use them. I am a mixed media artist, so I will be showing you the different ways I incorporate colored pencils into my art alongside gouache or watercolor. And I already did kind of similar comprehensive video about gouache, which you can also watch here on my channel. So this is sort of like a part 2 of the series showing you my favorite art supplies and me working with them. In the first part of this video, there's a short review of my favorite brands, and later on I will show you my favorite technique. As I mentioned, I am a mixed media artist, so I use my colored pencils in quite specific ways. I do not do realistic colored pencil art, and so different brands of pencils work for me better than probably they would for someone who's more worried about things like wax blooming or light fastness when choosing their colored pencils, but I am not really taking these in account here because I do scan most of my work and then work with it digitally. So for example, I don't have to worry much about how long will it take to disappear. I would like to start with a little theory on how colored pencils are made. Every colored pencil is made with wooden case and the core is made predominantly out of pigment and a binder, which can be either wax or oil based. And this is quite important to note because cores that have more wax behave quite differently than oily ones. The wax cores tend to be smoother and softer, better for blending, and I also find they usually leave thicker trace of the color on the paper, so they might be better if you want to cover a darker background with lighter colors to do little white details into your black painting. And the oil-based cores tend to be much harder, which also means that they can stay sharper longer and therefore they can be more suitable for details and precise work, lines, little lines and stuff. As I mentioned, every pencil also has its life fastness, which signifies how long it takes to fade away, but I do not sell my original artwork, so I don't know really about this as much. But if you want to know more about this topic, there's an excellent video here on YouTube by Sarah Renee Clark, which does super in-depth testing of so many brands, like hundreds of brands, and it's extremely interesting to also learn about how the professionals or how the companies test the light fastness of the pencils. And another thing important with every colored pencil is of course also their price. And as I said, I am a professional illustrator, so the brands I will be reviewing or mentioning here are all quite expensive since I do this as my job. And I'm sure you can also find much cheaper and budget options that are still good quality. But honestly, I'm not very versed in this area, and yeah, as always, feel free to leave your tips in the comment section. In my gouache video, the comment section brought so many new tips and brands to my life. I really loved it, and it's things that I wouldn't really know about, or brands I have never ever heard about in my life. So if you have anything you want to add to this, please feel free to. Now we take a short break to thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes in painting, knitting, computer programs, as well as more lifestyle-oriented classes on, for example, organization and journaling. The holiday season is the perfect time to start crafting gifts for your loved ones and maybe take up a cozy new hobby and start knitting. I've been making a baby sweater for my nephew, as well as a scarf for my sister, which is a perfect beginner project. The Knitting 101 by Vincent Williams is a great class to learn the basics. I've also been on a journey of turning one of my illustrations into a sweater. This is the front part, almost finished. I've made a chart using the intarsia technique, and video all about that will be coming in the future. So whether you want to learn something new or level up in skills you already have, Skillshare is a perfect platform to do just that. The first 500 people to use the link in the description or scan this QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started learning something new today. Now I will be showing you the 3 brands that I like to use the most and tell you more about them. I'm based in Europe, so these are also the brands that I can find here the easiest. Like, for example, I never tried Prismacolors. I know they're quite popular overseas, but they can get quite expensive here and hard to get. So even though I know so many illustrators swear by them, like I had never really get my hands on them. The first brand I would like to talk about is Caran, which I just learned how to pronounce it. I don't think I've ever pronounced it before, which is a Swiss brand of art supplies, and I really like their luminance line. And what I love the most about these is absolutely their color range. I mostly paint nature, whether it's animals, flowers, landscape, and I found that luminance pencils have quite an interesting color range of more natural and almost muddy tones, which I reach for the most. Here I am showing you some of my favorite colors, which I would say are quite unique shades. They are wax-based, which means they leave quite a lot of pigment on the page, which I also do really like. The cons of these pencils are definitely that some of the shade consistency is a little bit hit or miss for me. Like, for example, I don't really like their dark browns or black. Something about the way that they slide on paper is like off. They're very like charcoaly almost, but I don't know how to describe it really. So I would maybe reach, when I'm painting black, I would reach for a different brand. And another thing I know that people complain about these is definitely the price. They can get quite expensive. And I also tried a few of their Pablo line, and I must say I really do like these, but I only have like 5 pencils. But I definitely think I will buy more in the future when I have the chance. My probably most used brand of pencils is the Faber-Castell. I have this huge set that I bought many years back. You can see it's already quite beaten up and most of the pencils are missing, but I use this almost every day since. I think it's good to buy the set at first when you're starting out, especially because, as you can see here, you can quite easily tell which colors you use the most, and then when you maybe want to invest in other brands, in other colored pencils, you can only buy the colors that you're using actually, which is what I did then with the other brands. And I also wouldn't buy such a large set probably. I think this is 120 pieces, and you can see I didn't even touch many of these, so this was definitely too big for my needs. These are the polychromos. They are all oil based, which makes them stay very crisp and sharp for a long time, and I use them a lot for details and lines. The colors are also quite vibrant, especially their darker colors, which I do enjoy. And on the other hand, they offer a lot of very vibrant shades, but not for my needs, definitely not enough variety, especially in the greens and browns, which I like to use the most. They have like a very basic shades, but for example, Caran has this beautiful like purpley brown, which I have never really seen anywhere else, and the polychromos are very basic, I would say, in this sense. And spoiler alert, similarly to my gouache video, I would say that the brand that I reach for the most is Holbein. And if I would only have to choose one brand, I think Holbein would be like perfect in between in the Faber-Castell and Caran. I would describe these pencils, for the lack of better words, as very thick and rich. They behave almost like an oil pencil or like oil pastel, which is exactly what I'm looking for when I work. And the layer of paint that they leave on the paper is very thick, especially the lighter colors are super vibrant as well. and so I would use these a lot, especially since I do like to use lighter shades on darker backgrounds a lot. And for the other brands that I like but I don't use that much, I am a fan of Kohinoor Polycolor, which I used to use for the longest time. These were probably my first colored pencils that my mom bought me, and it's a Czech brand. They have shops everywhere here, and the price is like, they're quite cheap for the quality that they are, I would say, here in Czech Republic, probably not everywhere. And I still use them from time to time to sketch or do some not important work. And I would also love to try Prismacolor and Derwent if I manage to get my hands on them sometime. I do have some Prismacolors here which I got as a gift, and I am just waiting when I have more time to truly try them out. And now I will show you the different ways I like to accompany my gouache paintings with colored pencils and I divided them into a few groups or like few different ways. So here they go. The first way I would like to describe here is quite simple, speaks for itself. Basically, when my brush doesn't suffice, I like to go in and add some tiny details with my pencils. I think it also adds a bit of texture to the paintings, which is something that I usually go for, but not always. And for example here, after I finished this landscape, I went in and added some more flowers. Or here you can see me adding details to a painting of a building. Or I would maybe do lines in the leaves and stuff. And as I mentioned previously, I think Faber-Castell pencils would work very well for this, like I would reach for these. The next thing that I like to do, especially for landscapes, when I'm painting skies or a huge field of grass, I like to go in and enhance the textures a bit. I love to do this with the luminance pencils because their colors, they have quite a few colors that are very soft and work well, for example, if you want to add a tiny bit of texture to your skies. This third way is probably not as predictable as the other ways, but it's one of my secrets that I use in most of my paintings. We had a teacher in art school that would always tell us adding a bit of red here and there at the end of finishing a painting will tie it together very well, like visually, and I find it to be quite true. I do this also with blue sometimes, like I find it looks quite well in shadows, especially on darker green background. And I think this has been quite an important tip in my illustration, and it is quite I think it gives your painting a bit of an interest as well if you hide different spots of colors that are almost invisible here and there. I would also say try to be quite unpredictable with these. I don't think that all the leaves usually have to always be green and sky's blue. You can have fun with it, and I think that colored pencils can be very useful to do that. This is another and quite a fun way of how to utilize your pencils. You can see me here painting a pink background of a flower and adding green for leaves, but then I chose to not paint the background blue with gouache, but instead I'm using colored pencils. I also do this sometimes with skies, that instead of using gouache, I painted with a colored pencil or an oil pastel instead. I think it adds some interesting texture, and it can also look quite unexpected and interesting. And a lot of the time, especially when I'm lazy to do shading with watercolor, because that takes time, I choose to do it with colored pencils instead. I find it's a bit quicker, which is sometimes needed when you work on bigger projects. Here, for example, is an example of finishing the leaves of a flower, making it look a bit more 3D. When I put down on my watercolor, I did it in just surfaces of paint, but now I'm trying to add more depth to it. If If you have any other tips or find the things I said here useful, let me know below in the comments. Gotten any? As always, I really like it being a nice place where we can all discuss what art supplies we like and why. It's a very wholesome part of the internet, and let's keep it that way. It's awesome. And I would also like to apologize if I didn't use the right terminology in this video. It was a common point people made with my previous gouache video, and I think like I used the word hue instead of shade or something, and I really apologize for that. I am not an English native speaker, and of course feel free to point out my mistakes down below. I always like to learn. And have fun creating. Bye bye.